Hi, my name is Bertrand, and welcome to another episode of PowerEdge SoundBytes. Today, I'm joined with David Odell, one of my colleagues from the technical marketing engineering team. And before we get into our topic of conversation, David, why don't you introduce yourself briefly?
Hi, my name is David Odell. I'm a technical marketing engineer for the solutions and AI team here at Dell. Our job is to build hardware and software stacks related to AI and Dell solutions. Build those stacks up, test them, create technical assets on them. They could be white papers, competitive analysis, blogs, videos, training. We also, with AI, we also have code as assets sometimes. So snippets and notebooks that the public can use as well. So
cool. And I'm sure based on how popular GenAI and AI is these days, I'm sure you're a busy person. So thank you very much for taking the time today. Part of the reason why I wanted to chat with you is because of a blog that you published a couple of weeks ago. It was, I think, on Infohub.
Yeah.
Around something called RAG, which stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And it's a little bit of a novel concept. We've been talking about LLM for quite some time now, but we as Dell haven't really talked about RAG that much. Can you give me an idea of why you felt the need to write the blog, and also kind of give me a little bit of an idea of your thoughts on RAG and why we need RAG basically?
Well, I got excited about it because I'm excited about pretty much anything AI in general. I've taken a lot of coursework, and it's something I would call myself a hobbyist at home. It's where I'll tinker with it at home and such. I'm sure a lot of us are. But I enjoy AI in general because I feel like it does what computers were meant to do. It does things, it makes the decisions for us for the most part. And it's been my dream to get the computer to actually be this autonomous being who like Star Trek or something like that, so on that level. And I think traditional AI and generative AI offer a lot of that, but Gen AI in particular. So when I differentiate traditional and generative, what I mean is that traditional AI, like computer vision and other sort of applications where they perform a specific task to make predictions based on patterns. With generative AI, so non-traditional, we're creating new data. But and this is really important, and it comes down into retrieval augmented generation, is we're creating new data, but it's human-like and it's accurate. So those two pieces right there are sewn into the code of any sort of RAG application. It's otherwise, why do it? I mean, I can write something really quick to give me a dry binary response, yes or no, a prediction.
Yep.
But what I want is a really nice human-like and accurate response to whatever I ask it.
And I think the accuracy is one of the interesting aspects of LLM. And I feel like what we've discovered over the last 6, 9 months, 12 months-ish is that LLM are great, but they're fairly static entities.
Exactly.
In the sense that they're being trained on a specific data set, but if that data set changes or is dynamic, then you need to retrain them again to get the accuracy that you're talking about, which causes some challenges because we live in a world where data is not static and data is fairly fluid. And so that's what got me super excited about RAG is when I think of some of the downside of LLMs. I love the way RAG is approaching some of those challenges. Do you want to talk a little bit about how it does that?
Yeah. Also, I totally agree 1,000% with that concept of, or the fact that you can pull these, or you can create your own LLM. It doesn't really matter. You can fine tune one. You can pull one off the shelf. You can from scratch train your own. And you're right, they are static. And once they're built, they're done. If you want to make any modifications, then you have to do the retraining or the fine tuning. So, and that could take hours, days. It depends. So it has a kind of memory problem. Essentially, it can only remember up to a certain point, and then, well, I guess it's a knowledge gap problem. Like it only knows so much, and then it just drops off to zero. Where if you pull an LLM, say Llama from 2022, 2023, I guess 2023, it only knows that much up to say 2023, and in 2024, it's gonna have a large gap in its data because it needs to be retrained.
Exactly.
With RAG, since you are, and we'll get into how it does this, but just with RAG, you have a form of constantly evolving long-term memory, where you're not relying on the memory of the model really at all. If you are trying to query in certain queries, like if you ask it who was the 34th president of the United States, your own database, your own data set may not contain that, but the Llama model does, certainly knows that, at least basic general information. But we want to combine our RAG data set, I'll just call it that, with the Llama model, because we allow the LLM to grab that domain specific content that we have, that's our own proprietary information, and it's constantly evolving. So now we have a human-like voice, the LLM, able to give us our constantly evolving information. And that's why RAG is so powerful.
I agree. And before we recorded this, you and I were chatting, and you kind of brought an example where that I think is very pertinent to this conversation of what would be a use case for RAG. So do you want to walk us through a little bit that example of a support chat box, for instance?
Yeah. So if you so many companies, I'm not going to say every company, but the vast majority of companies have some sort of knowledge base, and they're going to get phone calls for help of some kind, or chat, I need help with your product or your service or something. And that can be tough to manage at the very least, because you have to have a lot of people involved. It takes time. People don't want to call for support. They just don't want. It's a terrible experience most of the time. We admit it, because there's a number of issues in the way. It could be technology's in the way, or the person's in the way, or it's a combination of both. The person doesn't have access to the right knowledge, and you can't get your question answered. What RAG hopes to achieve is to give in this example, you've got lots of companies that need help in their support pipeline, their support system. And why do they need help? Usually people are not that satisfied. Those scores are constantly being measured. Some companies do a great job of support. Apple does a fantastic job of support, but you probably have to pay for it. But for other companies that otherwise may not have a massive support backbone, they could definitely use some help. So if you can improve that customer experience, RAG is one way to do it. You might be able to use an LLM to help you out by offering your customer support either existing chatbot or your existing customer support technicians, your representatives, the ability to get human-like content that is domain specific to your particular business. So that would be one of the major use cases would be a domain specific knowledge base that is now accessible or able to be interacted with, the ease of an LLM and the kindness and the nice human touch of an LLM, rather than having, say, your support representative get lost in lots of technical document searches. The the LLM can do that search for you. Sorry, I guess the application, I shouldn't say LLM does the searching, but the LLM can certainly go through and give that knowledge a voice, help the customer representative provide either a direct path to solving your problem or enabling the user or the customer themselves to find a self-help pathway. And those two things right there are what are really going to make a huge impact on customer service. Is I called up, I found a problem, I found the solution to my problem really quick, and I had a great experience, or it gave me the tools to enable myself to go and solve that problem. Either way, I solved the problem very quickly. So those two methods, both of those I guess pathways are able to be solved, are able to be reached with a retrieval augmented generative system alongside an LLM.
Yeah, because the problem with this is that if what we're having a tendency to do today is that all chatbots are based on solely on LLMs. The downside with that is, and especially, and that's why I love the example of support cases, because new support cases, new solutions are being discovered and are being found every single day. And so if your support chatbot is purely based on an LLM, that means you're spending your time fine-tuning the LLM so that it can ingest the new content. And as we've discussed, fine-tuning is not exactly super easy, and it's very resource intensive. With RAG, because we're separating, and we'll get into it in a little bit, we're separating the knowledge base from the LLM. We can update the knowledge base on a very regular basis, whether it's every hour, every minute, or whatever. It's a very lightweight process. And so we're constantly updating that knowledge base, but we're providing that human-like experience through the LLM. And I think that's a very smart and it's a very elegant way, because it allows each of the components to do what they were designed to do, which is the knowledge base is always being updated and is always accurate. And the LLM is always capable of leveraging that updated and accurate knowledge base to provide the accurate answer. So yeah, that's why I'm super interested, and that's why I really like that example of support, because it really shows and highlights the dynamic nature of data. As a very high level, because you and I have discussed this, and we're going to do a second series on a deeper dive into the components of RAG. But at a super high level, what is RAG, and what are kind of the major components of RAG?
Yeah, so RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, basically is your knowledge base. Let's just say your PDF files that you've got for your company. And in this case, this is our proof of concept that we set out from Dell, is using a PDF database of PDF files that we scraped off our own website. So that's one major component, is your own proprietary data. Now, the cool thing with this is that you're not limited to just PDF files. You've got so many different file formats that you can pull from with these tools that we'll go into later. You can even get a Confluence extension. So if you need to make your Confluence knowledge base open to this, which really opens up lots of different knowledge bases that you can pull together into one application. Whereas before, if you were let's just say in our example, a support representative, well, I can only support this little vertical category because I'm limited to the data, because that data was prepared for me this way, and that's all I have visibility into. But your problem is over here, and or maybe it's related, and I can't give you any information for that. Yep. With RAG, we can set up very quickly, very easily, lots of different knowledge base types. So I can bring in, if I got a support request for or support call related to my motherboard and or a piece of software I'm using, and the the traditional answer would be to update my firmware. But if I also pulled in my coding or my beta testing knowledge base, well, then maybe it's like, well, maybe you can update your firmware, but there's also this little scrap of code that you could use that our developers use that'll give you more visibility to maybe some of the problems. So now I've got multiple sources of previously unused data, and that data is unbelievably valued. It's immensely valued. And now we can tap into our data that used to be considered not very valuable, that we're producing constantly. As a company, we're constantly producing data all the time.
Yep.
Now that data has value to it, or rather it has a lot more value because we can pull it in and make it comfortable for our users to ingest and for our representatives to give out, whether it's an automatic application as a representative or the actual tech support representative in our example. So the domain specific knowledge base is not limited to one particular format, lots of different formats, and it should come from as many valuable places within your organization that you feel are appropriate, so it's really, really powerful what we're stepping into. So that all gets, sorry, go ahead.
That's one aspect. What is, I mean, obviously, another significant component is the LLM.
So yeah, the LLM is incredibly important because that's how we're going to get that human-like voice from it. That's how we're going to avoid the binary response. Yes, no, we don't want that. We actually want, and we also want the LLM because a lot of LLMs can handle questions and a conversation. So not just yes or no, they can handle, okay, here's some options here. What would you like me to do? They're able to give you options right out of the box. So which really helps out. So you've got the LLM, the domain-specific knowledge base. You have to pull all this stuff together. You have to connect these things. And the major connecting tool that's out there right now is called LangChain. And it's in the name, chain, because it chains things together. And what LangChain does is not just, it's like, I liken it to a Swiss Army knife. It's got so many different tools on it that it slices, it dices, and it does all these different things. And so it can, well, we'll go into the details later, but that's one major component is how do you convert your domain-specific knowledge base into something the computer can understand, because the computer, I should say, the model or your application can understand. LangChain will do the conversion. It will split up your knowledge base into usable chunks that can go into what we call a vector database in some cases. And that information gets pulled into the LLM for more refinement. So the LLM doesn't actually go into your domain-specific knowledge base. Doesn't actually read it. The tool set goes in and gets that information and retrieves, thus the name. So LangChain will go in and retrieve content and then augment the LLM to generate a response. So retrieval augmented generation. So LangChain would be one big part, the part that kind of brings it all together. I would say the prompt itself is also a major part too, because that is the product that goes into the LLM. And a lot of folks don't understand how important a prompt is to an LLM. A prompt is not just a question, it's a set of instructions on how to behave, how to deliver the content, what tone to set. So I would argue that that's also a very important component. So, but yeah, database, LangChain to pull it all together, your prompt, and then finally the LLM response.
Cool, awesome. And yes, for the database, we can get into this, and we'll talk about it in our next episode. When we'll get into the component a little bit more, a lot more details. I like the way you kind of explain the retrieval and the augmentation, because I think that is really the crux of it, where when we're querying LLM, we're as you said, we're just querying the memory of the LLM, and that memory might, is a static memory. It can only it remembers up to the moment it was trained or fine-tuned. Whereas with RAG, we're augmented that knowledge and that memory with accurate and up-to-date information that you have within your knowledge base, and then it's the combination of the two that then becomes the response to the user, and ensure an accurate domain specific response. So super interesting. David, thank you so much for joining me today. We'll do a part two. We'll do a part two where we'll dive into components. We'll dive into LangChain, because there's some really cool stuff happening in
really amazing
LangChain.
stuff. We'll look into Gradio as well, because we got to have a slick front end for it as well.
yes, we do. And also we'll talk about not just a component, but how do they all work together to provide, I'm typing on my keyboard, I'm saying, hey, I want to know what is the best, how many GPUs can I get into a PowerEdge R760XA? What happens once I type enter? What happens on, behind that to make all of this happen, so that the chatbot kind of responds to me and say, hey, you can have X number of GPUs in a 760XA. So thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And stay tuned for our second episode on this. Thank you very much.
Thanks.